Good morning, everyone. All right, so little pop off of the low yesterday and short covering, big buying, just a little relief bounce, or is it the start of something big here? I think it's too early to say whether it's the start of something big. But we're talking about the potential of a turn here on the weekly time frame all week. And we had these terrible jiggles and going nowhere there for a few days and bouncing around within this range before the realization that there's a possible trade war that we've been hearing about now for months. So that reawakened, and we had the big gap down and the follow through to the downside yesterday. With that move off of the low at the end of the day, short covering or real buying, I guess we'll see what happens here. So looking at the spiders, and we'll look at the futures. We got the futures pushed up overnight, and now we got this gap, and we've got this jiggle that's gone on here. So that's the takeaway here is, now we've got, a reference point here from the overnight trading, a high and a low. And if it can get above this high here at 284, it opens up the door to moving up into this gap that you see over here. The big gap down from yesterday. So, yesterday's bar, and right now it's trading at 283.48, 283. Come on, move up. So gapping above the high of the bar. Here, assuming that we're there in the next half hour or so. And then we've got the overnight resistance. So pull back into the gap fill can be a consideration, or sideways chop for the first 20 minutes. We'll see how it unfolds. Could be the 10 o'clock reversal period. We'll see if it breaks out above here, which could send it up, into this. Let's just duplicate that. Send it up into this next area up there around 285. So there's our lines in the sand. Overnight trading above 284-ish. Look for another point or so. And if it gets below here, well, that could send it down to the low of the day. See the wide range bar there at the end of the day, and the bullish consolidation at the top overnight, and up it went. So there's our two lines in the sand going into the trading today. We'll see which way it goes, and I just hope for things not chopping around sideways in this level all day long, because that would be pretty boring. Either way, looking back to the weeklies, prices are still below their opening of the week. So we'll see here. Let's see here, 283. Well, if we can get above that, it'll turn this green. And then we'll see if it gets above here. Can it go up to 285, which would then give us the beginnings of a bottoming tail bar and a bias for next week, that above that bar, up it goes. Now, we always have two scenarios. I guess this is what I'll be writing about over the weekend. Well, I'll see where this actually ends up the day, what it looks like. But if it's a green bar, right, closing above its opening price, this line in the sand down here is going to be crucial to hold this area, because if it doesn't, and let's say next week it goes down, that opens up the door to a measured move to the downside and a buy setup failing. So always have two scenarios. One or the other is going to play out, and a crazy market, which this has been, on a smaller time frame, it could go both ways, where it pops up and comes back in, then goes down. But I don't want to think too far ahead of things. But right now, this is how I see things shaping up here, looking at the spiders. Looking at the Qs, similar, bigger pullback, but it had a bigger advance. And so now we've got this sideways range here, this pullback. And I'm interested to see whether that's just a bad tick, or I guess, yeah, that looks like maybe it's a bad tick, that move down there. But we'll see what the futures look like. I was kind of suspect that it went all the way down there. But, so, we got the same situation, lines in the sand. We got this support down here, but this pattern, right, this was the chop of the other few days, and then the move down and this reversal. So looking at the cues, that daily chart really isn't very inviting, honestly, as a long entry. But that high of the day is 179.02, which it's above. So gapping above there after a pullback, it makes sense that the long side makes the most sense. But let's see if it can take out these highs. So that's what we'll be looking for here in the beginning of the morning, to see if it can get through there. And then if it can, come up into the unfilled gap, 180-ish or whatever. We'll see how it turns out. And if this, again, can turn into a green bar, if it can stay strong into the close. The Dow's a big mess. It almost looks like an ADR with all these gaps and tails. It's a bit odd, but you can see the larger pattern here. We talked about, if this chops around here and then rolls over a head and shoulders top, and a move, as I'm showing there, a measured move to the downside. But, we got a lot of backing and filling to do here. Whether this is the start of a turn, we'll see into next week. But if this can get above this swing high up here, right, we're doing some of the factory work here, duplicate, and if it can get through that swing high, well, that is theoretically going to drive prices all the way back up to that old high up there. So have your lines in the sand. We set them up intraday. We set them up on the daily chart, the weekly chart. And then in this case, we have reference points relatively close above and below. And this keeps our bias in alignment with what is, as to what the probabilities are as to moves one way or the other. So these patterns right now are not suggesting any trending move. It's more about continuing to be nimble. With, maybe we get surprise moves, within these ranges that'll look big intraday. But right now, things just look like they're going to trade within a relatively small trading range until prices either break down below here or get above that level. Right? Pretty simple as that when you start looking at it like this, in this way. So we don't know what it's going to do right now. We need more information, which will unfold today and into next week after the holiday. Take a look at the Russell and the transports, and we got a similar story. The Russell was, as you know, we talked about this prior to this move down. It just looked fantastic. The weekly chart pulling back and coming back up, and the sideways consolidation at the high there, suggesting it was going to come up into this void. And what we were looking at was, prices breaking out. And then we had the big gap down, and it came all the way back up again. It's craziness. And then the gap down and started this correction. So the Russell came down close to that prior bottoming tail bar yesterday, and buyers came in. And so now it's coming up into this resistance area there. So this is really not rallying like the other markets above a daily bar's high. It's just in the middle of a range here, which is less than impressive. It's in the bottom of that wide range bar, and we'll just see if it can clear this area and join the party. If not, if it, it's like everything else where we put our lines in the sand. If it breaks those pre-market lows, well, that's going to open up the door to, well, at least not a huge move to the downside, but maybe a test of yesterday's low. So we'll see how it unfolds as the day does. Transports, I don't move much pre-market. Anyway, ugly gap yesterday and went down, relief rally with the other markets. It really looks like it needs to come down here around 180. And, if that's the case, if this just hangs around down here and winds up going lower, we don't trade this intraday. But it's probably worth setting an alert here, because if the we don't watch it intraday, but set an alert, because if the transports are showing relative weakness and start heading lower down toward this prior low, and you're looking at the Russell or the spiders or Qs, and they look like they're going to go up, you got to kind of look at it with, some skepticism as to whether that's a possibility if the transports are heading down to the lows. So into market analysis, what's one market doing versus another, makes sense to keep an eye on that. So looking at the futures here, see where they're doing. We get a clearer picture. Same story, weekly pullback, trying to make the turn at support. The big down day yesterday, trading inside of the range up into resistance, which we can see here. And it was already an attempt to turn it lower. And for the most, to this part right now, it's a red bar ignored, which is bullish, as prices came down a little bit and it turned back up. So looking at this, I wouldn't be looking to do anything at this point, other than I'd watch it on a smaller time frame, go down to the 5-minute, for example, and you get a little bit more detail as to what's going on. And based on this move up, you can see the topping pattern here in the beginning of the pullback. Can it hang up here? Meaning, if it can chop around sideways up there, well, then that opens up the door to us looking at this and saying, hey, if it can clear this high up here, well, maybe it can then open up the door to coming up into this area. On the other hand, if it breaks down below this low here, well, maybe we get some retracement into here, and whether this is just part of a bottoming pattern within the daily time frame, it brings us back to be nimble. And, we're in a range here. Doesn't suggest too much, but intraday, we'll still have opportunities. And just looking at the Qs here, the weaker at the bottom of the range, coming up into resistance, chopping around, same story, trying to make the turn. And a pattern like this, 3 bars down into minor support, historically is one in which the turn from red to green could happen next week. So we shall see. We shall see. The message across everything we're looking at here is don't have big expectations today, right? Intraday, there will be opportunities, if they can get above this level. And I think that is, if it works out that way, presents the better opportunity for something to happen intraday, since the way it came down, you've got more of a void here to rally up into yesterday's range, and this green bar expanding up into it. So we'll see. As I said, we've got our lines in the sand to trade against and see if they clear. Same story there with the YM, came up into these overlapping bars, red bar down, backing off from it, trying to get back through it. Pretty messy, a lot of overlap there. So same story, no need to repeat. Bonds cleared that high, right? Yesterday. Money was going into the bonds, which are setting the yields lower, which reignited to some extent whispers of the yield inversion, and it's starting to happen. It hasn't happened on the longest end against the shortest end yet, but it's getting closer to it. So that historically is what brings on the big bear market. There's quite a bit of lead time before it all takes hold, but something that we need to pay attention to. Alex asks me, would I keep YM over the weekend? I don't think so, Alex. I don't think so. If it looked like this, definitely not. If we just stayed around here and went down a little bit, no. I mean, if there was like some monster move today and it closed up here at 25,900, then I would say yes. But you got a big stop in whatever it's going to do. So if it's just looking at the chart here at the end of the day, and it just looks kind of like neutral into the bottom half of the red bar. Yeah, so no, I wouldn't. I'd just, kind of sit back and see what Tuesday brings us. Yeah. Gold, right, earlier in the week, I mentioned that this is where buyers need to step up, and they did that yesterday. The kind of the counter move to weak market money going into bonds and gold. So far, acting pretty well over here and trying to build that level. And this didn't follow through lower this week, so this could get interesting. We'll see if it can hang on to this gains here today, and maybe this gets interesting for next week. And lastly, taking a look at oil, that got a shellacking yesterday, and actually punctured through that prior pivot low, but closed above it and just hanging there. So now, just kind of our line in sand, whether that's lined up with anything or not, halfway in the big green bar there. I can drag this down a little. There's really nothing to the left, in that area. So we'll just see if this can recover or not. But clearly a lot of damage done in looking at the oil ETS, or RUXLE. Well, my eye is not seeing it. I know it's there. Anyway, I guess we'll just type it in. These oil ETFs just could not hold this low that it was trying to make here to pop back up with oil pulling back like it did. And the buyers that were accumulating here looking for the move up just ran away, as we would as well. So, a bottoming type of a pattern after a nasty drop and followed through to the downside. So oil sector stocks look like they're heading lower as well. So, just looking at the VIX here, not much of a move up with that sell-off yesterday. Interesting. Not that we focus on it much, but just as a point of reference, British pound has been getting pounded here, and it's just trying to hold this area. It's Brexit thing, but pretty substantial move to the downside in a relatively short period of time. All right, that's it for me, guys. Those of you on YouTube, have a fantastic weekend and holiday. We'll be back here after the holiday. I'll turn it over to Dan.
All right, good morning. So we continue the crazy gap situations. Open positions, we're actually flat in the weekly, but I'm pretty confident we'll be able to get some today that expired today, and then we'll play it by ear for next week. LOGM, we're short stock. MSI, we legged into a covered call. WBA, we're short stock. CPRT, long stock. Bought that in this little afternoon breakout. Intel, we picked up a put spread yesterday. AYX, we have a put spread, went against us, but it held the stop. Arna, long stock. This was kind of a 10-bagger trade. And our stop is half under 52, half under 50. Lima Hotel, put spread. WTFC, we're short stock. JMIA, put spread. PEG, long stock, that looks great. ETR, we're long a call. Looks great. CNF, put spread. Mohawk, nice closing high, covered call. Oh, we have a lot of opens. EEFT, put spread. DTE, long stock. It looks like it's, if it's gapping up there, we might want to sell a third. SPWR, this was a 10 bagger. It came in, but nothing to do. ARQL, long stock. Nice closing high. We'll go into trail mode. And finally, every. Gapping up here a little bit. We have a nice open gain. We're in that at 1082, so we actually sold half on the gap up yesterday. I'll move the stop in the morning session, and that's it. Some gappers here. Zulu Mike, recent IPO uptrend, came in ugly, but held minor support here, gapping up. That's a put spread candidate. Amazon, I heard on the news that somebody came out and gave them an upgrade to $3,000. FL earnings 46 bucks. It's an excessive gap. Let's just see what happens to it. Intuit earnings 249. Hey, there's a nice gap up. Gapping above. Perfect. Now all this is going to become support. That looks great. Let's go into both thumbnails. GWR. Wow, that thing did pop yesterday. Yeah, if you can get a put spread, definitely. Absolutely. FL gap and crap. I think you're using the wrong terms. Do you mean gap and snap? Because gap and crap means gapping up. Yeah, we'll watch it. HPQ. It's a big gap at the resistance. HPE. 1420, nothing there. Autodesk. What's down more? It was down 15 bucks last night. 159, that's a nasty gap. We'll see how it plays out. This was Greg's little coffee shop. Lima Kilo. We'll watch. Medtronic, that's a beautiful, it's holding well pre-market here too. That could be a day trade and a put spread candidate. Yeah, we already looked at this point. Gap in the 126. I mean, it's a mess. It's in a downtrend. I don't know what to do with it. These are leftovers from yesterday now, BBY. Lima Bravo we were looking at for a put spread on that pro earnings gap, but there was no juice. Yeah, any of these patterns like this that are gapping up and leaving a whole bunch of support here, as long as they hold in the morning session, 15 minutes or so, they're put spread candidates, sure. Look at Beyond. It's sloppy, but also we might even sell a put spread for today. Let's look at the 81s. I mean, it's juicy and volatile, so I bet even the 81s will have juice. Charlie India was a short watch yesterday. Maxer we were watching when it came out of its halt. That's holding well. AXS broke out yesterday. That looks higher. WBA. That's on my short watch. Yeah, if that triggers now, yeah, I like it. Short that. All right, we're in this WBA, but you can definitely add under yesterday's low. BKE. It's too extended for me, but it's a nasty crack on all time frames. Glancing at opens. All right, look at Intuit going here. That's a beautiful gap if you can get a put spread. That looks great. I hate it when they just run because then it's so hard to get on board without a big stop. But that's a beautiful put selling candidate.